So today we are going to be talking about emptiness, sunyata. And what we will be discussing, there are three types of emptiness understood from the Nikayas. There is the emptiness of self, emptiness of what is not present, and the great liberation through emptiness. Today we're going to touch upon two of those. The first is emptiness of what is not present and emptiness of self. Tomorrow we will discuss the liberation through emptiness. So I'll be reading two suttas. The first sutta, which is Majjhima Nikaya 121, 121, Chula Sunyata Sutta, the shorter discourse on voidness. Thus have I heard on one occasion the Blessed One was living at Savatthi, in the eastern park in the palace of Megara's mother. Then when it was evening, the Venerable Ananda rose from meditation, went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, he sat down at one side and said to the Blessed One, Venerable Sir, on one occasion, the Blessed One was living in the Sakyan country, where there is a town of the Sakyans named Nagaraka. There, Venerable Sir, I heard and learned this from the Blessed One's own lips. Now, Ananda, I often abide in voidness or emptiness. Did I hear that correctly, Venerable Sir? Did I learn that correctly, attend to that correctly, remember that correctly? Certainly, Ananda, you heard that correctly, learned that correctly, attended to that correctly, remembered that correctly. As formerly, Ananda, so now too I often abide in voidness. Ananda, just as this palace of Megara's mother is void of elephants, cattle, horses, and mares, void of gold and silver, void of the assembly of men and women, and there is present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the Sangha of bhikkhus. So too, a bhikkhu not attending to the perception of village, not attending to the perception of people, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of forest. His mind enters into that perception of forest and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of village, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of people, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of forest. He understands this field of perception is void of the perception of village. This field of perception is void of the perception of people. There is present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of forest. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there. But as to what remains, there he understands that which is present thus. This is present. Thus, Ananda, this is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. So this is the emptiness or voidness of what is not present. Here the Buddha gives an example. There is the palace of Megara's mother, where they are staying, and it has all of these different items. Right? And then this palace of Megara's mother is empty of horses, empty of cattle, empty of certain elements. In the same way, when one goes into the forest, Their perception is only of being in the forest. It is empty of the perception of being in a village, empty of the perception of being with people. And so that person is aware of what is present in the mind and what is not present in the mind. What is present in the mind is the perception of forest. What is not present in the mind is the perception of people, of the village. Again, Ananda, a bhikkhu not attending to the perception of people, not attending to the perception of forest, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of earth. His mind enters into that perception of earth and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. Just as a bull's hide becomes free from folds when fully stretched with 100 pegs, so too a bhikkhu not attending to any of the ridges and hollows of the earth, to the rivers and ravines, the tracts of stumps and thorns, the mountains and uneven places, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of earth. His mind enters into that perception of earth and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of people, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of forest, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of earth. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there. But as to what remains there, he understands that which is present thus. This is present. Thus, Ananda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. Now here, what he's talking about is, okay, now here the bhikkhu is in the forest. And then there is the mountains, the ridges, the hollows, the ravines, and all of that. All of the different aspects of earth. Then the bhikkhu connects with what is the earth element. Taking the earth element, he perceives the earth element internally and externally. And he turns it into a kasina. Okay? Now the word kasina traditionally has denoted that it is a point of single focus. It is an object of single focus. But actually the word kasina means to be whole. And therefore you are actually expanding the perception of earth. In other words, he takes that perception of earth and he pervades his mind with that perception of earth. And so when he does this, his mind is void or empty of the perception of the aspects of earth, and only is present in the mind the earth element. So as he spreads out this earth element, this kasina, he then experiences the next stage, which is what we'll talk about. Again, Ananda, a bhikkhu not attending to the perception of forest, not attending to the perception of earth, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space. His mind enters into that perception of the base of infinite space and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of forest. Those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of earth, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space. He understands this field of perception is void of the perception of forest. This field of perception is void of the perception of earth. There is present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there. But as to what remains there, he understands that which is present thus. This is present. Thus, Ananda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. So when you are experiencing the meditation, you are perceiving what is present in your mind and what is not present in your mind. If the mind is filled with hindrances, there is present hindrances. When you use the 6 R's to let go of hindrances, you understand your mind to be void of hindrances. And what is present there, the non-voidness, what is present there is the object of meditation, loving kindness. As you progress through your practice, you understand there is present now joy. There is present now thinking and examining thought. There is present now sukha. There is present now comfort in the body. There is present now ekagata. In other words, you are aware of the different factors of the first jhana. When you enter the second jhana, you are aware of what is empty in the second jhana. The second jhana is empty of thinking and examining thought. When you enter the third jhana, you become aware of what is present and what is not present, what is empty. The third jhana is empty of the joy, of the piti, of the second jhana. But what is present are the factors of the third jhana. Likewise, when you get to the fourth jhana, you become aware of what is present and what is not present. What is empty in the fourth jhana, or with the fourth jhana, let's say, is empty of the factors of the third jhana, namely the sukha, the comfort in the body. But what is present there is the pure mindfulness due to equanimity. And, of course, the object of meditation and other factors of the jhana. As your mind starts to become more radiant, starts to send out the loving kindness in all directions, then it starts to become aware of what is present and what is not present. What is the fifth jhana or infinite space empty of? Empty of the perceptions of form, perceptions of sensory impact. But it is aware of what is present, the perception of infinite space, the feeling of infinite space, imbued with the feeling of loving kindness or compassion. Again, Ananda, a bhikkhu not attending to the perception of earth, not attending to the perception of the base of infinite space, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. His mind enters into that perception of the base of infinite consciousness and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of earth, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. He understands this field of perception is void of the perception of earth. This field of perception is void of the perception of the base of infinite space. There is present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. Thus, he regards it as void of what is not there. But as to what remains there, he understands that which is present thus. This is present. Thus, Ananda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. As you start to radiate compassion, that compassion changes to mudita, to empathetic joy. And then that transitions to an experience of infinite consciousness. So your mindfulness is such that you become aware of what the mind is empty of, but of what also is present in the mind. In other words, you see that now the mind is void or empty of the perception of the base of infinite space. But it is aware of what is present, which is the base of infinite consciousness, tied to empathetic joy. Again, Ananda, a bhikkhu not attending to the perception of the base of infinite space, not attending to the perception of the base of infinite consciousness, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness. His mind enters into that perception of the base of nothingness and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of infinite space, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness. He understands this field of perception is void of the perception of the base of infinite space. This field of perception is void of the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. There is present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there. But as to what remains there, he understands that which is present thus. This is present. Thus, Ananda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. Now the feeling of empathetic joy naturally, automatically changes to upekkha, to equanimity. And then the mind becomes void or empty of the base of infinite consciousness. And then there is present in that field of perception. When they say field of perception, they are talking about the mind's attention. Now the mind attends to that which is present, which is the perception of the base of nothingness, tied to equanimity. Again, Ananda, a bhikkhu not attending to the perception of the base of infinite consciousness, not attending to the perception of the base of nothingness, attends to the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. His mind enters into that perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Say that 5 times. And acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of infinite consciousness, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. He understands this field of perception, the mind, is void of the perception of the base of infinite consciousness. This field of perception is void of the base of the perception of the base of nothingness. There is present only this non-voidness, namely the singleness dependent on the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there, meaning what is not there is the emptiness. But as to what remains there, he understands that which is present thus. This is present. Thus, Ananda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. Now, the upekkha, when you radiate the upekkha, when you radiate the equanimity, soon the mind starts to taper off. That energy of radiating starts to slow down. And then it stops. And there is present only this field of perception, that is the mind itself. We call this quiet mind. In the beginning, it might not be too quiet. But when you get to this quiet mind, don't do anything. Don't try to figure out what is this mind. Don't try to figure out what is this sankhara arising. Don't try to figure out what is that thought coming up. Don't try to figure out where should I be resting. Don't try to figure out what should I be observing. Don't do anything. There is present only this mind. And tied to that, there is present the base of neither perception nor non-perception. You become aware of the base of neither perception and non-perception when you have that feeling or that experience where mind seems to be alert but asleep at the same time. And there might arise certain kinds of patterns and pictures and colors and shapes and things like that. Don't do anything. Let them go. Let them be. Don't pay attention to them. Look through them. Don't look at them. Be present in the mind itself. Don't do anything. Again, Ananda, a bhikkhu not attending to the perception of the base of nothingness, not attending to the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, attends to the singleness dependent on the signless concentration of mind. His mind enters into that signless concentration of mind and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus, whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of nothingness, those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely, that connected with the six bases that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life. He understands this field of perception is void of the perception of the base of nothingness. This field of perception is void of the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception. There is present only this non-voidness, namely, that connected with the six bases that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there. But as to what remains there, he understands that which is present. Thus, this is present. Thus, Ananda, this too is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness. There comes a point where the mind itself becomes coarse. There's a collectedness that you experience with the mind. But the edges of the mind have a certain kind of tension. And so what you do there is you soften the edges of the mind. In your mind's vision, when you close your eyes, the periphery of that vision, you start to soften the edges over there. And now the mind dissolves into pure awareness. This awareness is void of the field of perception, or this field of perception, which is this awareness, is void of the perception of neither perception nor non-perception, is void of the quiet mind. It is looking at nothing. It's not nothingness. It is just looking, but not looking at anything in particular. It is aware, but not aware of anything. There is just awareness. Signless concentration of mind, that comes from the word Animitta samadhi. A nimitta, right? Sometimes when people have, very concentrated states of mind, they experience delights. Those are called nimittas. But nimitta actually means object. So this is the objectless samadhi, the objectless meditation. This is the signless state of mind. And this signless state of mind doesn't take anything as an object. It just is pure awareness. When you get to this state, don't do anything either. Just be aware. There is sometimes something coming up in the periphery, and then the mind wants to relax. In the wanting to relax, the sense of I am comes about. This state is similar to the experience of anatta. Seeing things as they are, undistorted, unaffected by taking things personally. As soon as something comes up, the mind is triggered to relax it. But in the relaxation of that, the mind brings up the idea of the I am. So don't do anything. In the very seeing, in the very observing, in the very knowing of there being a disturbance, that disturbance passes away. And the mind returns back to that signless awareness. Again, Ananda, a bhikkhu, not attending to the perception of the base of nothingness, not attending to the perception of the base of neither perception nor non-perception, attends to the singleness dependent on the signless concentration of mind. His mind enters into that signless concentration of mind and acquires confidence, steadiness, and resolution. He understands thus, this signless concentration of mind is conditioned and volitionally produced. But whatever is conditioned and volitionally produced is impermanent, subject to cessation. When he knows and sees thus, his mind is liberated from the taint of sensual desire, from the taint of being, and from the taint of ignorance. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it is liberated. He understands birth is destroyed. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. Here, in the signless concentration of mind, certain kinds of thoughts in the periphery kind of percolate. As soon as your attention goes to that thought, it strengthens that thought. But if you just allow things to be and don't do anything, let the percolations just rise and fall away, eventually, the last formation, which is the formation of conceit related to the me, mine, myself, that fades away and the mind enters into the cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness. And from there, the mind touches the unconditioned. And if circumstances are right, can experience liberation from the taints. Then he understands whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the taint of sensual desire. Those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the taint of being. Those are not present here. Whatever disturbances there might be dependent on the taint of ignorance. Those are not present here. There is present only this amount of disturbance, namely, that connected with the 6 bases that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life. He understands this field of perception is void of the taint of sensual desire. This field of perception is void of the taint of being. This field of perception is void of the taint of ignorance. There is present only this non-voidness, namely that connected with the six bases that are dependent on this body and conditioned by life. Thus he regards it as void of what is not there. But as to what remains there, he understands that which is present thus. This is present. Thus, Ananda, this is his genuine, undistorted, pure descent into voidness, supreme and unsurpassed. So now, after attaining Nibbana, the mind reviews what happened. After attaining full awakening, the mind reviews and sees that this field of perception, that is the mind, is empty of the taint of sensual desire. No longer any craving, sensual craving. Empty of the taint of being, no more craving for existence. Empty of ignorance. Complete understanding of the Four Noble Truths. And there is present only this, the six sense bases, conditioned by life. So these six sense bases give rise to contact. Contact gives rise to feeling and perception. There is present all of this, but no longer the taints. When there are no longer the taints, there is no longer ignorance. When there is no longer any ignorance, there is no longer any formations rooted and fettered by craving, by delusion, by ignorance, by conceit. And so there is present only the activity of the six sense bases. This awareness of the activity of the six sense bases doesn't attach a me, myself, or I to it. It just sees it as it actually is. There is present only these six sense bases. Ananda, whatever recluses and Brahmins in the past entered upon and abided in pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness, all entered upon and abided in this same pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness. Whatever recluses and Brahmins in the future will enter upon and abide in pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness, will all enter upon and abide in this same pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness. Whatever recluses and Brahmins in the past and in the present enter upon and abide in pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness, all enter upon and abide in this same pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness. The pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness is the mind that is liberated and empty of craving, empty of delusion, empty of conceit, empty of wrong views. And so that mind is present in itself, aware of itself as being empty of any kind of craving. This is understood as one level of emptiness, that is to say, that this mind knows it is empty from the taints, empty from any craving links, empty from any kind of conceit. And this is that pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness. Therefore, Ananda, you should train thus. We will enter upon and abide in pure, supreme, unsurpassed voidness. That is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Ananda was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. So this was the first sutta. I'm actually going to read 3 suttas, short. The next sutta is Samyutta Nikaya 35.85. Empty is the world. Then the Venerable Ananda approached the Blessed One and said to him, Venerable Sir, it is said, empty is the world. Empty is the world. In what way, Venerable Sir, is it said, empty is the world? It is Ananda because it is empty of self and of what belongs to self, that it is said, empty is the world. And what is empty of self and what belongs to self? The I, Ananda, is empty of self and what belongs to self. Forms are empty of self and of what belongs to self. I consciousness is empty of self and what belongs to self. I contact is empty of self and what belongs to self. Whatever feeling arises with eye contact as condition, whether pleasant or painful or neither painful nor pleasant, that too is empty of self and of what belongs to self. And so with the sense bases, the other sense bases, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind, these are empty of self and what belong to self. They're objects, sounds, smells, tastes, tangibles, and mind objects. These are empty of self and what belong to self. Ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, mind consciousness is empty of self and what belongs to self. Ear contact, nose contact, tongue contact, body contact, mind contact is empty of self and what belongs to self. Whatever feeling arises with ear contact or nose contact or tongue contact or body contact or mind contact as condition, whatever feeling that arises dependent upon these, whether painful, pleasant, or neutral, these are empty of self and of what belongs to a self. So what we are saying here is that when you investigate what is the world is measured and known by the experience of your six sense bases. But the experience of the six sense bases are dependent upon contact. That contact is made up of the sense base object, and the sense-based consciousness. Investigating into this, you see that the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind, did you bring it up? Did you create it? Is it you? Or can it be observed and seen as not me, not mine, not myself? The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind, these arise dependent upon causes and conditions. And they change over time. That which is self is permanent, does not change. This is the idea of that self, or whatever belongs to self. But this is always changing. The forms that you see are always changing. The sounds that you hear are always changing. The smells that you smell are always changing. The tastes that you taste are always changing. The touches that you experience are always changing. And the thoughts that you observe are always changing. That cannot be self. The awareness of them is always changing, dependent upon their arising and passing away. That can't be self. And then the experience dependent upon their contact, that is always changing. That can't be self. So when the Buddha says, empty is the world, he says, it is Ananda because it is empty of self and what belongs to self, that it is said, empty is the world. This level of emptiness is the experience of anatta. Just the pure observation. That's it. In the seeing, there is only the seeing. In the hearing, there is only the hearing. In the cognizing, there is only the cognizing. How does one know this? Just by observing the process of seeing. Just observing there is seeing going on. Just being aware there is hearing going on. Just being aware there is tasting going on. No self in it, no I or me before it, no I, me or myself after it. Just seeing it, and that's it. No judgment about it, no noting it, no labeling it, just seeing it, just observing it. So this is a small sutta to kind of understand this level of emptiness, but we're going to go a little bit deeper. Now we're going to look at it from the perspective of the 5 aggregates. Because the 5 aggregates are modes of experience. Everything we experience is through the body, through feeling or sensation, through perception, through intentions or formations, and through awareness. So this sutta is Samyutta Nikaya 22.95. And it's called a lump of foam. On one occasion, the Blessed One was dwelling at Ayodhya on the bank of the river Ganges. There the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus thus. Bhikkhus, suppose that this river Ganges was carrying along a great lump of foam. A man with good sight would inspect it, ponder it, and carefully investigate it. And it would appear to him to be void, hollow, and insubstantial. That foam, right, on the water, that is hollow, void, and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a lump of foam? That lump of foam is so fragile that it can just split apart and disappear. So too, bhikkhus, whatever kind of form there is, whether past, present, future, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a bhikkhu inspects it, ponders it, and carefully investigates it, and it would appear to him to be void, empty of self, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in form? And when we talk about form, we're talking about the body, but we're talking about all form. Whether it's my body, your body, this microphone, this book, this water bottle, these speakers, these walls, this building, everything that has form. Far or near, here in India or there in the US. Here in Bir or there in Dharamshala. Superior or inferior. It's small or big or medium, doesn't matter. Gross or subtle. Whether it's the form that we see here in the body or the form of atoms and molecules. Past, present, or future. Whether it was your form as a child, as a teenager, or as an adult. All of that is ever changing. Subject to disintegration, just like a lump of foam. If that is the case, how can you take it to be self, or what belongs to self? That self is not, that form is not me, not mine, not myself. Suppose, bhikkhus, that in the autumn, when it is raining and big raindrops are falling, a water bubble arises and bursts on the surface of the water. A man with good sight would inspect it, ponder it, and carefully investigate it. And it would appear to him to be void, empty, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a water bubble? When it's raining, right, and it falls under raindrops and you see the little bubble, it bursts apart. And as the more water hits the water, more rain hits the water, there's all these bubbles being created, but they come and go. They get created and destroyed, come and go, rise and pass away. So too, bhikkhus, whatever kind of feeling there is, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a bhikkhu inspects it, ponders it, and carefully investigates it, and it would appear to him to be void, empty of self, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in feeling? All sensation you're having, all experience you're having right now, it's arising and passing away at a very phenomenal rate. The commentaries talk about this, especially this particular passage. And they conclude, now this is their number, but it doesn't matter what the number is. They conclude that a feeling, whether it's feeling born from eye contact, ear contact, nose contact, body contact, tongue contact, mind contact, arises and passes away in every moment, in a finger snap, in every moment, at the rate of 10,000 crore arising and passing aways. Sorry, let me correct myself. 100,000 crores. That is 1 trillion arising and passing away in a finger snap. When you see for yourself in infinite consciousness the arising and passing away of consciousness, you are seeing this. The contact, the feeling, the perception. You are seeing the arising and passing away at a very slowed down rate. So this experience that you're having right now, the sound waves that you're experiencing right now, they seem very fluid. You're able to perceive what the experience is. But if you truly saw it, you would see the gaps in each sound wave, in each experience. You are seeing me and I am moving around in a seemingly fluid manner. But if you really slow things down, you would see iotas of feeling that the mind is grasping onto, and then creating this idea of a fluid experience. But really what's happening is if you actually saw it, you would see it under strobe lights, like how I would move in a jittery manner. You know? And this can happen whether you are sitting in meditation in infinite consciousness or with your eyes open. I can speak from experience about this. One time when I was in San Diego and meditating, I was walking into the kitchen and I suddenly went into infinite consciousness. And the people in the kitchen started moving like mechanized robots. And there was the arising and passing away of light. And it was like each film reel was starting to slow down in my mind. And it's pretty freaky. But when you see this, that feeling, what is it that you're trying to grasp at the experience? Experience of the eyes, the nose, the ears, the tongue, the body. Maybe the body you try to hold on to in one way or the other, but even that is insubstantial. Trying to hold on to what? Trying to hold on to thoughts. How do you hold on to thoughts? They are extremely fickle, arising and passing away. And as we know, anything that arises and passes away, especially at that rate, cannot be said to be a permanent self. Cannot be said to be constant and stable. So let go of the idea that whatever it is you're experiencing is mine, is me, myself. Let go of that idea. Just see it for what it is. Impermanent, empty, void, insubstantial. Suppose, bhikkhus, that in the last month of the hot season, at high noon, a shimmering mirage appears, A man with good sight would inspect it, ponder it, and carefully investigate it. And it would appear to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a mirage? So too, bhikkhus, whatever kind of perception there is, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a bhikkhu inspects it, ponders it, and carefully investigates it. And it would appear to him to be void, empty of self, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in perception? A mirage, when you see out into the distance and you see that mirage on a hot day. And then you look at it again and it's no longer there. It disappears. This is how our perceptions are. Remember, our perceptions are the concepts, memories, ideas, all of these different things that arise in our mind. The labeling of things. We take those so seriously. When we perceive something, when we have a memory of something, we perceive it a certain way. But another person who has been in that memory will experience it in a completely different way. So who is right? That perception of whatever that memory was, they see it in a certain way. You see it in a certain way. Because you have implemented a sense of self to that, and they have implemented a sense of self to their perception. Concepts. All our mind experiences are concepts. What is this table? What is this desk? It's a concept. You take out one leg of the table. Is it still a table? We create concepts in our mind. Our mind only sees in concepts. I say you are human, you say I am human. That's a concept. That's a label. That's a name. We all consensually together agree, that this is the color red. But I perceive it as red, you perceive it as red. How do I know that you're perceiving it in the same way I am perceiving it? Yet we have all basically agreed to say that is red. Another concept. Internally, in our mind, we have concepts about who we think we are. And then people tell us who they think that we are. And then that's their concept of us. So how do you live? Do you live by the concept you have of yourself? Or the concept that others have of you? Better not to live under any concept. Seeing this, the mind has to let go of adding any self to any kind of concept. They are just concepts. Observe them as they are. This is a concept. In that observation, no self is there. No self is added to it. The experience of anatta is just through pure observation. Not thinking, not analysis, nothing. Relax into the awareness of the experience. That's it. Suppose, bhikkhus, that a man needing heartwood, seeking heartwood, wandering in search of heartwood, would take a sharp axe and enter a forest. There, he would see the trunk of a large plantain tree, straight, fresh, without a fruit bud core. He would cut it down at the root, cut off the crown, unroll the coil. As he unrolls the coil, he would not find even softwood, let alone hardwood. A man with good sight would inspect it, ponder it, and carefully investigate it, and it would appear to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in the trunk of a plantain tree? So too, bhikkhus, whatever kind of volitional formations there are, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a bhikkhu inspects them, ponders them, and carefully investigates them. As he investigates them, they appear to him to be empty, void of self, hollow and insubstantial. For what substance could there be in volitional formations? Here we're talking about our choices, our intentions. Every choice that we've made in the past, every choice we make now, every choice we make in the future, all decisions are dependent upon various causes and conditions that are taken into account. When you see a person, you see them as a person. But when a fully awakened person, a being, if they wish to see a person, they see all of the cascading karma that leads to that person in that moment. Our choices are nothing but a cascading of karma, dependent upon causes and conditions. This is the subtlest aspect, because we say this was my decision. I took the choice. I had that intention. But these intentions, these choices, they arose dependent upon the causes and conditions that led to that choice and made that choice. Including the choices that are presented, but also all the information in the mind present in that moment to make that choice. But all of that information is nothing but feeling and perception. And we already know feeling and perception are not me, not mine, not myself. So those intentions, those choices also are empty of self. This might be a difficult exercise, but when you see a person, don't see a person. See them to be a result of all of the trillions of choices that they've made, cascading down into that moment. This is what the world is. This is what samsara is. A series of choices, interpenetrating, cascading through the different lenses. All of this different karma coming together to create a choice. Let go of the need to make any choice. Making a choice is very disturbing to the mind. So for some, it can be very debilitating. They get indecisive. And then they go into analysis and experience analysis paralysis. They don't know how to make that choice. Let go of any attachment to any choice. Use your intuition. Let the mind come to the choice and let the choice be made. The only deciding factor there should be, is the choice in alignment with the Dhamma or not? Not to do with, does it affect me or affect another person in this way or that? Is it in alignment with the Dhamma? Which means, in essence, is it non-harmful to another being and non-harmful to this body and mind? Suppose, bhikkhus, that a magician or a magician's apprentice would display a magical illusion at a crossroads. A man with good sight would inspect it, ponder it, and carefully investigate it, and it would appear to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in a magical illusion? So too, bhikkhus, whatever kind of awareness there is, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, a bhikkhu inspects it, ponders it, and carefully investigates it. and it would appear to him to be void, hollow, insubstantial. For what substance could there be in consciousness, in awareness? This awareness that we experience is tied to feeling and perception. When you become aware of something, you need an object to be aware of it. Even awareness of awareness, let's say, the awareness of the mind itself. It is tied to the mind, and the mind is made up of components. Take away its components, the mind disappears, so too the awareness dependent upon it. See your awareness not as you, but as a function of the mind, dependent upon the mind. So even the very observation of an experience is dependent upon that experience. And then the superimposition of the observer happens through the mind that says that this is me, this is mine, this is myself. But rarely there is just observing going on. Relax in the observation. Remember, going back to that statement, in the seeing there is only the seeing. In the observing there is only the observing. In the meditating there is only the meditating. Don't add anything to it. No I, me, myself in it, before it, or after it. Seeing thus, bhikkhus, the instructed noble disciple experiences disenchantment towards form, disenchantment towards feeling, disenchantment towards perception, disenchantment towards choices, disenchantment towards consciousness. Disenchantment. What is disenchantment? Another word for disenchantment used in the suttas is revulsion. Doesn't mean aversion towards it. What it means is you've had enough of it. If I give you your favorite meal and I say, here, have this. I had the best chef make it just the way you like it. And you eat that meal and you relish it and you're saying, wow, thank you so much, that was great. And I say, but wait, there's a second portion here. Have some more. And out of being polite, you say, okay, I'll have another portion. Then I say, hold on, there's another portion. Take a third portion. How will you feel? Revulsion. I've had enough, please. This is disenchantment. When you are in quiet mind, when you are experiencing thoughts, you've had enough of them. You don't care about them anymore. Let them come, let them go. I don't care. Now your mind isn't interested in getting caught up in them, getting engaged in them. In the same way, when you see it for it, what it actually is, the form, the feeling, the perception, the choices, the awareness, arising and passing away, eventually you have disenchantment. Okay, they're there. I don't care. Doesn't matter to me. It's fine. I've had enough. I've seen enough. Experiencing disenchantment, he becomes dispassionate. Dispassionate. Vairagya. Detachment. Disconnected with it. There is a bubble around you, unaffected by it. This all happens naturally. It will happen naturally as you get deeper into the practice. The perception of impermanence. Remember, the perception of impermanence leads to the perception of dukkha. The perception of dukkha leads to the perception of anatta. Seeing all this as empty of self. The perception of anatta leads to the perception of equanimity. Seeing things as they actually are. not grasping. And that leads to the perception of disenchantment, which leads to the perception of dispassion, detachment, completely unaffected. Don't know what's going on, don't care. Just being in mind, that's it. Just relaxing in mind. Through dispassion, the mind is liberated. There comes cessation. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge it is liberated. He understands destroyed is birth. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more for this state of being. This is what the Blessed One said. Having said this, the Fortunate One, the teacher, further said this in verse. Form is like a lump of foam, feeling like a water bubble. Perception is like a mirage. Choices like a plantain trunk, and consciousness like an illusion. So explain the kinsman of the sun. However one may ponder it and carefully investigate it, it appears but hollow and void when one views it carefully. What does this require? Careful inspection, not analysis, not investigation, not reflection in that sense. Just pure observation. Careful attention, yoniso manasikara. With reference to this body, the One of broad wisdom has taught that with the abandoning of three things, one sees this form discarded. What three things? The abandoning of these three things, the body is discarded. When vitality, heat, and consciousness depart from this body, then it lies there cast away, food for others without volition. This body arises and passes away dependent upon heat, vitality, and consciousness. We're going to go deeper into this tomorrow, but heat here is the heat of cellular metabolism. Vitality is the jivat indriya. It is that which animates the body. The experience or the processing of the nervous system. And consciousness. But remember, that consciousness continues to arise and pass away. Such is this continuum, this illusion, beguiler of fools. It is taught to be a murderer. Here no substance can be found. Such is this continuum, this illusion, beguiler of fools. It is taught to be a murderer. Here no substance can be found. It takes up an identity. I am a man. I am a woman. I am Indian. I am American. I work at so-and-so company. I am a Buddhist. I am an atheist. I'm a doctor. I'm a philosopher. All of these identities, it just takes on, just pushes onto this form, this feeling, this perception, these choices. A bhikkhu with energy aroused, using right effort, using the 6 arts, should look upon the aggregates thus, whether by day or at night, comprehending with full awareness, ever mindful with observation. He should discard all the fetters and make a refuge for himself. Let him fare as with head ablaze, yearning for the imperishable state. You must have heard this before. Like a man with his head on fire in search of water. Observe these things and come to that imperishable state, the unconditioned, to Nibbana.